Want to welcome everybody who's coming in to our workshop today. We're going to give it just a minute or two to let everybody trickle in, and we'll get started here in just a minute. Thank you for being here. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Paul Vaughn. I'm with the North Carolina Bar Foundation. I want to welcome you to today's workshop, When is the Right Time to Form an Entity? The workshop today is presented by the North Carolina Bar Foundation's NC LEAP program, and your presenter today is Donna Ray Berkelhammer. Before I turn things over to Donna, I would like to say a huge thank you to our partners for helping make this happen. Mountain BizWorks, Prospera, and the North Carolina Small Business Center Network. So thank you very much for helping make it happen. You may ask Donna questions at any time by typing them in the chat. Questions are going to be moderated by North Carolina Bar Foundation Senior Director Kim Bart Mulliken, and Donna will answer each one when she has an opportunity. So thank you again very much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Donna, and I hope you enjoy today's workshop.
Welcome, everybody. I do want to encourage you to type in questions as you have them, and it'll be a lot more valuable to you if you don't hold them to the end and we can answer them a little bit in context. I've been a business attorney for probably more years than I care to count right now, and I've always worked with small business owners and startups, and it's important to me to help people have a really solid foundation for their business. And one of the classes I teach a lot is 7 simple steps to protect your small business. And everybody who attends that class thinks I'm going to get up there and tell them, okay, step number 1, form an LLC or a corporation. And they think that's what I'm going to say because I'm an attorney and they think I want to get the money from them. But that's not necessarily the case. In that class where there's 7 steps to protect your business, forming a corporation or LLC is step number 6. And some of the things I teach in that class, I'm also going to teach you in this class, but this one we're not going to go as in depth because this is more introductory. The reason to form a company or an LLC is to manage your risk and to protect your personal liability so that your house and your bank account, and if you have stocks, if you have a car, all that is not at risk if something bad happens in your business. So the cornerstone, the most important thing you can do as a business owner is figure out what kind of risks you have. Those risks could be physical. Are you in an office and you're running extension cords all over the place so your employees might trip? Are your risks cyber? What kind of information do you have on people? And do you have a firewall? And is your computer and your laptop and your phone encrypted? So if you lose it, are people going to have your client's personal information? Is your risk employees? Do you have customers that face your employees and you have a hothead that goes off on your employees and causes scenes? So what kind of risk do you have in your business? What keeps you up at night? Worst case scenario, if something goes wrong, what would it be? And think about how you can protect that. Um, the two most basic cost-effective ways to protect your business before you even get to an entity is good commercial insurance that is customized to your business and your risk. A lot of startups have an insurance agent for their car and their home or their renters. Maybe you have life insurance. Those are all what we call personal lines. Your Go to your personal line agent if you have one. Start there. Start with the relationship you have. Talk to them about your business and figure out what kind of insurance you might need. Sometimes these personal lines people or their companies don't offer a lot in the way of commercial insurance, or they're not very knowledgeable. So get them to refer you to a commercial agent and just sit down and figure out what you need. A good agent is going to listen to your business and get you something that's customized and relevant to you. So that's the first thing you can do, is have good insurance. Insurance is really cheap and it's a really easy way to protect yourself. The second thing you can do to protect your small business is have a contract with your customers that sets forth everything you are going to do and how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, how they're going to pay you, when they're going to pay you, what you're going to pay them back for, when you would refund their money. If you have a service business, the statement of work is really important. So you're very clear about what you do, what you don't do, and when you're finished. Pretend you're a graphic designer and you have a new client that's coming to you to develop a logo for their business. And you send them a contract and it talks about, here's all the steps we're going to go through, and I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to give you 3 preliminary designs. You're going to pick one, and then I'm going to do the final logo. And you go through that whole process, and the whole time your customer is, yeah, I love it. I love it. I want this one. Let's go this way. And then you present the final business card and stationery, and you're getting ready to have it all printed. And they say, oh no, I changed my mind. I want red instead of blue. And if your contract's not very good, you might have to do that for free. And you might have to do that for free a bunch of times because it's not clear that you're done. So before you even think about a business, look at your risks. What can you do to make them not risky? Insurance is one thing, and a good contract is another thing. And I want to make sure you all understand the whole purpose of a LLC or a corporation is so that you can have something we call limited liability. And what that means is that all the liability, all the damages, anything that goes wrong, stays in the business entity and doesn't go to you personally. So I'm going to tell you a story about a woman named Catherine. She loved to bake. When her kids were in school, she was the room mother, and she sent in cookies and cupcakes and home baked these elaborate cakes for her kids' birthdays. And as they grew up and left the house, she poured all that creative energy, and she'd send in treats to her husband at work. And eventually some of the people at work hired her to make baked goods for their kids, and she'd send in muffins and she'd make cookie cakes. And eventually her friend said, you should start a business. So she opened Catherine's Catering, and she started doing parties all over town, and she got super busy, and it got to be too much for her. So she hired Daniel, the delivery driver, and she realized if Daniel was making deliveries and dropping things off and she could set up different events, she could do twice the business. The problem is Daniel had a wreck on the way to a party and he hit a school bus. I really need to update this because we don't have school buses right now. But he hit a school bus. Nobody was badly injured, but every single parent of every single kid on that bus sued Catherine. And the person that was having the party wanted a complete refund of all their money because Catherine and Daniel didn't get there to set it up and the party was ruined. And they wanted emotional distress because they were so embarrassed. And Catherine just started this as a small business at home, and she didn't really think about what I just told you. What are the risks? What could go wrong? And so she had to liquidate her savings account and go into her 401k and sell their boat to pay all the kids that were on that school bus and refund all the money for the party and pay to fix the bus and pay to fix Daniel's car. That's all personal liability because Catherine didn't even think to get a business insurance policy. So there was nothing but her personal assets to pay all of those claims that were business related. Now, business insurance would have covered a lot of that. If she'd had, she'd had Daniel as an employee and he was covered under her insurance, or she had a company car, that would have reduced her risk. And if she had an LLC or a corporation, that would have reduced her risk as well. So that brings me to the main meat of our conversation today. When is the right time to form your entity?
Donna,
And yes,
can I interrupt with a question?
yes.
Somebody asked, do I need commercial insurance on top of malpractice or liability insurance?
So malpractice insurance is generally for a licensed professional, a lawyer, a doctor, those accountants, people that are not licensed professionals usually have something called errors and omissions. A real estate agent, if they forget something on a contract, that would be errors and omissions. That is for your personal negligence in providing your services. General commercial liability is going to be if you have an office and there's a slip and fall. Breach of contract, sometimes things your employees do. That's very general, very basic. That applies more to general businesses than malpractice or errors and omissions. Did that answer your question? If you have more, just follow up and Kim will let me know. The other thing while I'm on it, I always recommend people get something called umbrella insurance, which is like, it sounds like it's extra insurance that pops up if your limits on your underlying insurance are overrun, and it's really cheap. It's maybe $400 or $500 for $1 million of excess liability. So if you have employees, if you have company cars, if you're a director on a company, mine covers me if I'm on a nonprofit. I have it for my homeowners and for my business. For my homeowners, it's extra if I get into a wreck with an uninsured motorist, if I have a catastrophe at my house and people get hurt. That's super cheap. So you can ask about that too. So as you're doing your business plan and you're starting up and you're looking at your risks and how do I fix it, there are a couple of places where it makes sense to form your entity. You can absolutely do it at the beginning, no question, no problem. But a lot of people I work with are bootstrapping, and the cost of forming the company and having an attorney and having an accountant and keeping up with that is too much for them. And so, can they wait? If you have a super risky business, the two riskiest ones in my mind are businesses that deal with children and businesses that deal with food. Your downside is huge. So if you have those, absolutely 100% form an LLC. I'm working with one of my clients now who has a coffee shop that he's terminating the lease early because of COVID. And he found somebody to take over his lease, and it's a guy that does fried seafood, and he doesn't have an LLC. And I'm just beside myself because not only is it food, but it's seafood, and he's got personal liability if anybody gets sick. And I said, make him get an attorney, even if it's not me, get an attorney for that. He needs to have an entity. Food businesses, there's also specialized products liability insurance if something gets spoiled that you can get, and I recommend that. So immediately LLC or corporation, and I'll go in a little bit in detail later about which one and how you know. If you've got a really risky business or you have the money and it's no big deal, do it at the beginning. That's clearly the safest thing to do. There are two other reasons I think that are really valid to do an LLC or a corporation. One is for tax purposes. Even if you're super low risk, you can manage all your risk with an insurance and a contract, and there's really not much there. Maybe you're a consultant and you've got some errors and omissions. And your contract says worst case scenario, the client's not happy, you refund 6 months worth of fees. But you're making so much money, you could save money on taxes by becoming an S Corp. That is a super valid reason to become an entity. And the other one is sometimes there's a real marketing reason where you want to be Legal Direction LLC and not just Donna Berkelhammer attorney. It gives you a lot more credibility in the marketplace if you're an entity and not just a solo working out of your house. Nothing wrong with working out of your house. I work out of mine, but sometimes you want the appearance of more than that, and having LLC after your company name can give you that. So really, in my mind, the three reasons to form an entity are risk management, tax management, and marketing. For most small businesses, the two entities excuse me. The two entities we look at are an LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company. Excuse me, I'm going to have to step away for a minute and get some water. I will be right back.
While Donna is getting some water, I'll just take the opportunity to let everybody know that we do have other workshops that will be coming up in the somewhat near future. February 18th, we have Getting Started for Entrepreneurs, and March 9th, we will have a workshop on contracts. So you can go to the NC Leap website for more information about those workshops and with registration information there. Thanks. There you go, Donna.
Sorry about that. That was the one thing I forgot to bring to my desk before we started.
No worries.
Were there questions while we're stopped?
Yes, there was a follow-up to the first question.
Okay.
So she noted that she's a nurse and a coach, and she's been told to form a PLLC. So she knows she needs the malpractice insurance, but in trying to keep costs down, she's wondering if it's still necessary to get commercial insurance, given that it's a virtual business and no physical office and no employees.
I personally do not have general commercial liability insurance for similar reasons, and my insurance agent worked really hard to try to get me to have it. And I just said, look, nobody's coming to my house. If I meet people, it's either at their office or in a coffee shop. And they said, well, what if you're meeting someone in a coffee shop and the person you're meeting trips and falls? and tries to sue you, I said, I'm willing to take that risk. So if it's virtual services, you don't have anybody coming to your location, you don't have employees, your personal auto can cover you going to and from things for work, I don't think you need general commercial.
And there's one more, a question about securing insurance. Do you need to have all of your services identified and outlined before you go to that step?
Insurance is based on your industry, and different industries have different risk profiles. So if everything you're going to do is similar, it won't matter that you have everything outlined at the beginning. As you add things, think about adding insurance because it's cheap. And in my opinion, it's better to be overinsured than underinsured. Start with what you're actually doing. And then as you get close to launch new things, just run it by your insurance agent and see if that changes anything. Because the last thing you want to do is add something risky that's not covered.
Thanks.
Okay. So limited liability company and corporations are the two entities that are most often used for small business. They both give you identical limited liability protection if you form them properly and you run them properly and you're not fraudulently undercapitalized. So form them properly means you have filed the proper document at the Secretary of State. You have your EIN. For a corporation, you have to have an initial meeting. You have to name shareholders and directors. You have to name officers and directors. You have to issue stock. It's a little bit more complicated than just filing your certificate with the Secretary of State. LLC, you file your articles, you get your EIN. You can have an operating agreement, but you're not required to. You have to keep up with certain things. You have to, for both of them, every year you have to file an annual report with the Secretary of State, which basically says, yes, I'm still in business. Here is how you contact me. Here are my officers or managers. Very, very basic. There's a fee associated with that. It's $200 for an LLC and $25 for a corporation. I have no idea why it's different, but it is. And being properly capitalized, I have never in real life had anybody who was not properly capitalized. There's a case we read in law school where there was a taxi cab company in New York City that one of the drivers was involved with a hit and run with huge medical costs. And when they sued the taxi cab company, it turns out they had 100 LLCs with 2 cabs in each one, something like that. And the bare minimum insurance that they were required to have by law. And based on the operations of the company and what the risks were, the court found that that was fraudulent and they weren't properly formed because they weren't properly capitalized based on the level of risk. And the person who was injured was able to sue the owners of the taxi cab company personally, even though there was a corporation. I've never seen that, even with people that are bootstrapping and borrowing from friends and family or, working on credit cards to form their business. I've never had one that was fraudulently undercapitalized like that. So, properly formed, properly capitalized, properly run, you are treating your LLC or your corporation like a separate person. You have money, it goes into your business bank account. To get it out, you either have salary or you have expense report, just like you were working from somebody else. It's clear that which money is yours and which money is your company's. A lot of small businesses get tripped up on that. So corporation, I think people are pretty familiar with. Even for a small one-person company, think about a huge publicly traded multinational company like the Coca-Cola Corporation. The people who own it are the shareholders. Shareholders' primary job is to elect directors, the board of directors that sets the policy for the company. You know, are we going to market in Singapore? Are we changing the shape of the bottle? Who's our ad agency? What kind of benefits? They make these big policy decisions and they say to the officers, okay, we're going to delegate this policy to you guys to execute. Every person that owns a corporation has all three of those roles. Sometimes it's a little difficult for small businesses because you are doing all of that and it's hard to figure out which hat you're wearing at a particular time. It's very centralized, it's very formal. And that's what a corporation is. So a lot of small businesses prefer to be an LLC, which is basically a partnership that has limited liability. So you can have people in there, they can, if you have a corporation, it's basically how much money did you put in, that's how much you own. And how much you get out is based on your percentage of ownership. LLCs are super flexible because they're created by contract between the members, the owners. So that's the big difference as far as structure. There used to be a lot of tax differences between LLCs and corporations, but with the latest revision to the tax law last year, for the smaller businesses, there's not a marked difference I'm seeing anecdotally. I work with a CPA when I'm forming businesses, and we have the CPA kind of run the numbers based on how much income the company is going to make, what other assets the company has or the owner has. And it used to be sometimes the CPA would come back and say, oh, definitely you need to be a S Corp because blah, 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 blah. I'm really not seeing a strong preference for corporations right now based on the latest round of changes in the tax law. So some people are a lot more comfortable with an LLC because there's not as many rules and it's a little bit easier to run. Kim, I think there might be questions.
There is. Is the business considered active if you filed paperwork for the state but did not start business because of COVID? For example, you don't have an EIN or expenses for the business in 2020.
It is not active as far as the IRS is concerned, but you will need to file your annual report each year, whether you're doing anything in there or not, to hold it open, because the Secretary of State, the only way they know that you want to keep your business is you're filing that annual report.
Thank you.
I think that's really all I have prepared, but I am happy to answer questions if there are any more. Oh, I will say one more thing. Corporations, sometimes I say corporations, sometimes I say S Corp. It's the same legal entity. S Corp is you file a form with the IRS that says, I know I'm a corporation, but I'm sorry. Yeah, I know I'm a corporation. I want to be taxed like a partnership. So the difference between a regular corporation and an S corporation is if you're taxed like a corporation, you're taxed like a partnership. That's 100% accounting, and it doesn't have any legal significance other than there are restrictions on who can be the owner of a S corp. You have to be a US citizen or a green card holder, and you can't have more than, I think it used to be 75. I think they increased it to 125 owners, but it's still a corporation. It's just taxed differently.
We have another question. If the LLC has just one member and the IRS considers it a disregarded entity, do you still have the limited liability coverage in North Carolina?
You are disregarded as far as the LLC does not have to file its own tax return. that's what's disregarded. It just means instead of a tax return at the entity level, you are filing a Schedule C on your personal income taxes. But yes, you still have limited liability.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, we do one. We have one. The question is, we are in the process of moving from Florida to Asheville within the next 3 months. Do we need to file our annual report here, meaning Florida? We are not actively doing business as we're transitioning to North Carolina.
That's hard to say on the facts. If you are going to what we call domesticate your Florida company into North Carolina, it needs to be in good standing in Florida for you to be able to do that. If you're going to close that one down and just start over with a new company in North Carolina, I don't know that it matters, but if it doesn't cost too much, I would go ahead and pay it and just have the options open.
Any other questions? Feel free to put them in chat or into the Q&A. We have one. If international business is a business objective, would you go with an LLC or an S Corp?
I think that's probably going to be tax driven. It used to be that anybody looking for outside investments or doing business with companies in other states, we told them to form a corporation because nobody knew what an LLC was. That may be more of a marketing and tax question than a legal question. Absolutely, an LLC can do business overseas. They can have contracts internationally, but your overseas partners may be more comfortable dealing with a corporation. And also, if you start as an LLC, it's relatively easy to convert it to a corporation should you need to. A lot of my clients start as an LLC because it's easier, and then they graduate to corporation.
Thanks. So question, what is the difference between closing business to transfer to another state and starting a new LLC? And does that affect future investment options due to the length of business or all of the expenses incurred in this year starting it up, presumably in the first state?
That one I cannot answer in this general of a format. That's going to be very specific to that person.
Got it. Other questions? Well, I am going to put a link to the NC LEAP program where we will post this webinar when we're finished recording, and you can see upcoming webinars as well as recordings of prior webinars. If you have topics to suggest for future webinars, please feel free to email us at ncleap@ncbar.org. And before we lose Donna, are there any final questions?
Can I plug my stuff, Kim?
Absolutely.
I have a blog for small business owners and entrepreneurs that we post almost every Monday. My website is thelegaldirection.com, and the blog is called Direct Talk. And actually, I have been blogging about a lot of the topics we just talked about this year, but there's a lot of information there and pretty digestible chunks for small business owners.
Great. And I just put that information in the chat as well. If there are no final questions, I want to thank Donna for being with us. This was great information. I learned a lot, and I hope that the attendees enjoyed the presentation and had a chance to learn a bit more and have their questions answered. Paul, anything else to wrap up?
Nope. I want to also thank Donna for giving your time for doing this, and thank our partners once again, Mountain BizWorks, Prospera, and the Small Business Center Network. Thank you for helping make this happen.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day.